They took everything from her, her throne, her people, her name. But some fires refuse to die quietly. Watch as the exiled queen rises, unbroken, to reclaim her world. Stay till the end, hit subscribe, and comment your favorite moment. This is a story you won't forget. They were supposed to trust her. They were supposed to follow her lead, believe in her vision, and protect the world she had built. But betrayal is an ugly thing, and it strikes hardest when you least expect it. She had ruled her world with wisdom and courage, a queen not defined by her crown but by the strength of her people and the depth of her resolve. Every decision she made, every law she enacted, every risk she took was with a singular purpose of ensuring prosperity and safety. And yet, in one night, everything crumbled. The world had been vibrant, alive with the pulse of a civilization that had mastered both art and science. Cities glimmered with crystal towers that harnessed the energy of the sun, forests thrummed with engineered lifeforms, and oceans sparkled with technologies that purified and enriched. Her people thrived because she had understood something few rulers ever truly grasp. Power was meaningless without trust, and leadership was nothing without sacrifice. She had sacrificed, again and again, for them. And they had believed her, loved her, followed her. That was why the betrayal cut deeper than any blade. It began subtly. Messages intercepted, guards who once nodded respectfully now avoided her gaze, and advisors who whispered behind closed doors. The signs were there, but pride and trust blinded her. She believed in the loyalty of those who had sworn allegiance, in the bond forged through blood, sweat, and shared victories. She had survived wars, negotiated peace where others had failed, and stood firm against threats that could have consumed entire civilizations. She was confident, and that confidence was her undoing. The night the coup began, the air was heavy with a storm that seemed to mirror the chaos about to descend. Explosions shattered the calm. Alarms screamed through the capital, a sound that would forever haunt her memory. Soldiers she had raised from children, trained personally, now turned their weapons against her. The people who had celebrated her victories now cowered or fled as the traitors claimed the city's heart. She moved through her palace with precision, issuing orders, but it became clear almost immediately that her commands were meaningless. The chain of command had been broken from the inside. The throne she had fought so hard to secure was already slipping through her fingers. She was not defenseless, but the odds were impossibly stacked. Each corridor of her palace was a battlefield, every room a trap set by those she had once trusted. They had studied her, anticipated her movements, and struck with surgical precision. She fought, yes, with every ounce of skill and strength she possessed, but it was no longer just a war of armies. It was a war of betrayal, and betrayal is an enemy that strikes from within. Friends fell around her. Advisors she had trusted to the end gasped their last breaths at her side. The queen realized then the cruel truth. The world she had built, the life she had protected, was being dismantled not by some external force, but by those who had once called her their leader. Outside, the city burned. Towers that had stood for centuries crumbled into rubble. Streets ran with fire and debris, a chaotic mirror to the devastation inside the palace walls. She could hear the cries of her people carried on the wind, a haunting symphony of despair and terror. She wanted to stop it, to save them all, but she knew, deep down, that this night was a turning point. She could not protect everyone, not when the foundation of her kingdom had been poisoned from within. Every instinct screamed at her to fight harder, to push further, to refuse to yield, but she also understood the weight of reality. Sometimes survival was the first step toward vengeance. Her escape was brutal. There was no parade of honor, no dramatic farewell. Only smoke, fire, and the sting of betrayal. She fled through secret passages, corridors only she knew existed, moving like a shadow through the ruins of her once proud palace. The loyal few who remained followed, silent and shaken, bound by the faint thread of loyalty that had not yet been severed. Each step away from the city was a step into exile, a journey into uncertainty, but also into possibility. The queen's mind was already racing, plotting, planning. She would not perish in the flames. She would not disappear into history as a footnote. She would rise again. They thought they had won. They thought that by stealing her throne and scattering her people, they had erased her power, her influence, her legacy. But they underestimated the one force that could never be destroyed, the indomitable will of a human heart. She carried the memory of her people with her, every voice, every laugh, every tear, fueling a fire that no betrayal could extinguish. The betrayal of this night was not the end. It was the beginning. And though she walked alone into exile, her steps were heavy with resolve, each one a promise. They had taken her world, but she would reclaim it. With fire. With cunning. With vengeance. As she disappeared into the darkness beyond the borders of her homeland, the echoes of the coup lingered. The palace was no more than a shell. Streets were rivers of molten metal and shattered glass. Her people were scattered, hiding or enslaved. Her advisors, those who had not turned traitor, were hunted or silenced. And yet, amidst the ruin, the queen felt no despair. She felt clarity. The path ahead was treacherous, full of unknown dangers and impossible odds, but the same mind that had built an empire could rebuild it. And the same heart that had been betrayed could turn that betrayal into power. The flames that consumed her home would not consume her spirit. They would ignite it. Every exile begins with a loss, but some losses are seeds for revolution. She would nurture that seed. Every step she took away from the ruins was a step toward preparation, toward strategy, toward the reclamation of everything that had been stolen. She remembered the faces of her people, their trust, their loyalty, their suffering, and each memory became a sharpened edge in her mind, a weapon she would wield with precision. They had stripped her of her crown, but not of her mind. They had scattered her subjects, but not her influence. They had ignited her world in fire, and she would answer with a storm. She did not weep. She did not beg. She did not falter. Her spirit was a living force, honed by years of ruling, tested by the cruelest of betrayals, and tempered by the unwavering truth that no matter how far they pushed her down, humanity, her own unyielding humanity, was capable of rising again. They had stolen her world, but they had not yet met the force of the queen who would reclaim it, stronger and more dangerous than ever. The night was theirs. The dawn, however, would belong to her. Exile was supposed to break her, to strip away her identity, her dignity, her sense of purpose. Instead, it became the crucible that forged her into something sharper, stronger, more dangerous. The world outside her fallen kingdom was harsh, unwelcoming, a place where only the cunning survived. Every gust of wind, every jagged rock, every shadow lurking in the darkness tested her endurance. Yet, with every step, she reminded herself that survival was not enough. She would not merely exist, she would rise, and she would reclaim what was hers. The fire that had consumed her palace now burned within her, a relentless, insatiable force driving her forward. The first days were the hardest. Hunger gnawed at her, fatigue clouded her mind, and isolation pressed against her soul like a vice. She had been a queen, surrounded by loyalty and comfort, and now she was alone, stripped of all that defined her. But despair was a luxury she could not afford. The human mind has a way of adapting when the stakes are survival, and hers recalibrated with lightning speed. She observed, learned, and began to understand the patterns of this unfamiliar land, its dangers, its opportunities. Every obstacle became a lesson, every hardship a tool. Even the sharpest rock beneath her foot or the bitterest wind against her face contributed to her preparation. She discovered allies in the unlikeliest of places. Wanderers, exiles, even creatures thought primitive, recognized her strength, her resolve. Loyalty, she realized, was not born from title or wealth. It was earned through courage, vision, and the willingness to stand against impossible odds. She did not beg for allegiance. She inspired it. Her mind became a blade, honing strategy, predicting moves before they could unfold, learning to turn scarcity into strength. Every ally she gained was a thread weaving together the beginnings of a tapestry that would one day blanket her reclaimed world. Her training was relentless. Her body, once used to ceremonial rituals and council chambers, became a weapon honed by discipline and necessity. Her mind, sharpened through years of rule, now focused on tactics, strategy, and survival in its purest form. She experimented with tools, learned to manipulate the environment, turned the unfamiliar terrain into her advantage. Improvisation became second nature. Adaptation, instinct. She realized that human potential was limitless when guided by necessity and determination. Where others saw chaos, she saw opportunity. Where others saw despair, she saw fuel. Every day was a step toward vengeance, every night a meditation on the power she would reclaim. In this exile, she also learned patience. It was not enough to act rashly. Timing was everything. Observation became her greatest weapon. She learned the habits of potential enemies, the weaknesses in distant settlements, the patterns of supply and movement. Every detail, every fragment of information, was stored and analyzed. Her exile transformed from punishment into a campaign of preparation. Her mind, once occupied with the minutiae of palace politics, now calculated with ruthless clarity. Every calculation brought her closer to the inevitable moment when she would strike. The queen also faced her own doubts, her grief, her anger. They were constant companions, gnawing at the edges of her resolve. But she embraced them, not as burdens, but as tools. Anger sharpened her focus, grief deepened her empathy, doubt forced her to examine every plan with scrutiny. She became a master of herself before she even touched the world again. Every trial in the wilderness, every confrontation with danger, every moment of exhaustion and hunger was a step in forging the weapon she was becoming, a weapon not of destruction alone, but of calculated reclamation. She began to envision her return with precision, not as a blind storm, but as a series of strikes, each one designed to weaken, confuse, and dismantle the forces that had betrayed her. Her mind mapped every possibility, calculated every response, and built contingencies for contingencies. Every encounter, real or imagined, honed her foresight. Every lesson from the land, from her allies, from her own endurance, sharpened her ability to predict, to outthink, and ultimately to dominate. She understood that human ingenuity was the greatest force at her command. It was not raw strength alone that would reclaim her world. It was intellect, creativity, and relentless resolve. She also nurtured her emotional core. A ruler is not only a strategist but a symbol. Even in exile, she carried the weight of her people's memory, the echoes of their hope and despair. That emotional connection became part of her arsenal, reminding her that her fight was not for pride or vengeance alone. It was for justice, for restoration, for every soul wronged by the betrayal that had torn her from her throne. Her resolve was not hardened into coldness. It was forged into a burning clarity, a purpose that transcended pain and fear. This was the essence of human strength, the ability to rise not despite suffering, but because of it. Her reputation began to grow, quietly at first, whispered among those who observed her in the shadows, then spreading further as tales of the exiled queen's cunning and determination reached distant ears. Even far from her homeland, her name became a symbol of hope and defiance. Those who had been oppressed or betrayed themselves saw in her a reflection of what could be accomplished with courage, intelligence, and relentless perseverance. Human potential, when pressed to its limits, becomes unstoppable, and she embodied that truth in every calculated move, every daring act of survival, every display of resilience. By the time she was ready to make her first move, she was no longer the queen who had fled her palace in flames. She had become a force honed by adversity, tempered by exile, and fueled by an unquenchable fire. She had learned patience without losing urgency, strategy without losing instinct, strength without losing compassion. Every hardship had been a lesson, every setback a refinement of purpose. She carried within her the essence of what it meant to be human: ingenuity, courage, adaptability, and the refusal to yield to forces that sought to destroy her. The exile had shaped her into a weapon of intellect and will, poised to reclaim her world with precision and fury. And so, as she gazed toward the distant horizon, toward the lands that had been stolen from her, toward the throne that awaited her return, she felt the full measure of her readiness. Exile had been a crucible, but she had emerged not weakened, but sharpened. She had turned despair into resolve, loss into preparation, grief into focus. The queen had become a master of herself, a strategist of unparalleled cunning, a symbol of human resilience. She would no longer run. She would no longer hide. When the time came, she would strike, not blindly, not recklessly, but with the unstoppable force of a mind and spirit forged by fire, exile, and unyielding will. The world had thought her broken. They were about to discover the truth. She had survived exile, endured hunger, pain, and isolation, and now she moved with purpose. Survival was no longer enough. She needed power, allies, and resources. Every choice she made was calculated, every step measured to rebuild what had been stolen. The queen understood that reclaiming her world required more than brute strength. It required strategy, foresight, and the ability to inspire others to follow her. Her mind had been sharpened by betrayal and hardship, and now it was time to turn that edge outward, to assemble the forces that would bring her enemies to their knees. Her first priority was the people. The scattered remnants of her loyalists, those who had evaded capture, became the foundation of her rising power. She sought them out, often alone, relying on cunning and stealth to reconnect with those who had once trusted her completely. Each reunion strengthened her resolve. Every warrior, advisor, and citizen she reclaimed became a vital piece of the puzzle, a thread in the tapestry of her strategy. Loyalty, she knew, could not be coerced. It had to be earned, demonstrated through action and trust. She proved it with her determination, her courage, and the certainty that she would not abandon anyone who chose to stand with her. She began to gather intelligence, mapping the movements of her enemies, understanding their weaknesses, and predicting their responses. Knowledge, she knew, was the foundation of power. Where they relied on brute force and fear, she relied on observation, ingenuity, and calculated risk. She learned to manipulate supply lines, disrupt communications, and turn small victories into psychological blows against those who had thought her defeated. Every skirmish, every maneuver, every clever tactic reinforced her reputation as a queen who could not be outwitted or underestimated. Human ingenuity, she realized, was the most dangerous weapon in her arsenal. As she rebuilt her forces, she also trained them relentlessly. Every ally had a role, every skill refined, every strategy drilled until instinct became second nature. She emphasized creativity and adaptability, teaching her followers to think for themselves while following her guidance. The queen understood that even the most disciplined army is vulnerable without initiative and intelligence. Her forces were not just fighters. They were thinkers, problem solvers, a reflection of her own resilience and tactical brilliance. Each member became an extension of her mind, a living embodiment of her relentless will. She also cultivated tools and resources that others overlooked. Abandoned technologies, forgotten weapons, and natural elements were repurposed to serve her strategy. Improvisation became second nature, turning scarcity into strength. Where others saw limitations, she saw opportunity. Every trap, every improvised weapon, every carefully constructed plan demonstrated her understanding of human adaptability. The queen's forces became more than soldiers. They became an unstoppable blend of intellect, ingenuity, and determination, capable of turning the smallest advantage into decisive action. Every confrontation she orchestrated served multiple purposes. Not only did they weaken her enemies physically, but they also destabilized their confidence and morale. Swift, calculated strikes reminded them that the queen was neither defeated nor diminished. Her return was a constant reminder that human resilience, when combined with intelligence and preparation, could overcome overwhelming odds. She exploited their arrogance, their assumptions that her exile had rendered her powerless, and used it against them. Every minor victory built momentum, confidence, and fear, all in equal measure. She also built a network beyond the battlefield. Spies, informants, and sympathizers fed her information from within enemy ranks. Every whispered rumor, every hidden message, every seemingly insignificant detail became part of her growing map of power. She understood that wars are won long before armies clash in open battle. They are won in the mind, in the planning, in the exploitation of weakness and opportunity. The queen's exile had taught her patience, observation, and timing, and now she applied those lessons with precision. Human ingenuity, once tested to its limits, became a force that even the most powerful enemies could not anticipate. Her influence began to ripple across the lands. Towns that had once cowered under enemy rule began to rise quietly in her favor. The oppressed and the disenfranchised saw her as a beacon of hope, a living proof that tyranny could be challenged, that betrayal could be overcome. She inspired not through promises, but through action, showing that strength combined with intelligence and compassion could reshape destinies. Human resilience, in all its forms, physical, mental, emotional, became her most potent weapon. Every supporter she gained multiplied her potential, turning her cause from a desperate fight into an unstoppable movement. The queen also embraced unpredictability. Her enemies expected conventional tactics, but she employed strategies that leveraged deception, speed, and innovation. Feints, ambushes, and diversions created openings where none seemed possible. Her ability to adapt in real time, to turn setbacks into advantages, made her a force beyond comprehension. The enemy's overconfidence, built on assumptions of her defeat, became their downfall. The queen understood that intelligence, creativity, and relentless focus on a goal could bend reality itself to human will. Every strike she executed was a lesson in human adaptability, audacity, and precision. By the time her forces were ready to confront the central territories of her enemies, She had transformed from an exile into a general whose reputation alone inspired fear. She had reclaimed villages, freed captives, and disrupted the enemy's infrastructure, each success a stepping stone toward ultimate reclamation. Her people saw her as unstoppable. Her enemies saw her as a specter that could not be predicted, controlled, or defeated. She had turned exile into strategy, loss into momentum, and despair into purpose. Every victory, no matter how small, was proof that human determination, intelligence, and courage were forces that could never be extinguished. And through it all, she remained singularly focused on the ultimate goal, the complete reclamation of her world. Every plan, every maneuver, every ally, and every strategy was aligned toward that moment when she would stand again at the heart of her kingdom, unchallenged and victorious. She had gathered fire, sharpened her mind and her forces, and prepared for the reckoning that was coming. Those who had taken everything from her had unknowingly given her the tools to become more than a queen. They had created a force that would remind the universe that human resilience, ingenuity, and will are unstoppable. Her enemies believed Exile had defeated her. They were about to discover the truth. The time for preparation was over. Every calculation, every alliance, every lesson learned in Exile culminated in this moment. She moved with the precision of a mind sharpened by loss, every thought a weapon, every decision a strike. Her enemies believed she would act recklessly, that her rage would blind her judgment, but they underestimated the queen's intelligence. Anger was not her guide. Strategy was. Every move she made was deliberate, each one designed to dismantle her adversaries piece by piece, to reclaim what had been stolen with a force that could not be resisted. Her strikes were swift and unexpected. Where they had fortified their positions, she found vulnerabilities overlooked in arrogance. Where they relied on intimidation, she employed cunning. Every maneuver showcased human ingenuity, using terrain to her advantage, creating diversions, exploiting the weaknesses of enemy formations. Her forces, trained in exile, executed orders with flawless precision. They were an extension of her will, every action reinforcing her unshakable control over a campaign designed not only to win battles but to shatter morale. She understood that the mind of the enemy was as much a battlefield as any city or fortress, and she wielded it with surgical efficiency. She liberated territories with intelligence and speed. People who had once cowered in fear now rose at the sight of her forces, their loyalty and admiration rekindled. Every rescued citizen became part of the movement, adding strength, knowledge, and determination to her growing army. Human courage and adaptability were on full display. Those who had endured oppression now learned to fight and strategize alongside their queen. Her victories were not just military, they were moral triumphs, affirming the indomitable spirit of those who refused to be broken. The enemy's propaganda crumbled as swiftly as their defenses, revealing the power of a determined human force led by intellect and resolve. Every engagement demonstrated her mastery of both strategy and psychology. She struck where her enemies least expected it, using precision attacks to cripple supply lines, dismantle command structures, and sow chaos within ranks. She did not merely confront them with force, she outthought them, anticipating every reaction, predicting every counter-move. Human ingenuity, honed by necessity and sharpened by adversity, became an unstoppable weapon. Every encounter reinforced a singular truth. No matter how strong or prepared they believed themselves to be, they could not outmatch a mind and will tempered by betrayal, survival, and relentless determination. The queen also ensured that her victories carried meaning beyond the battlefield. She protected innocence, shielded the oppressed, and punished only those who had betrayed, harmed, or oppressed. Her morality became part of her power, inspiring loyalty and fear simultaneously. Those who had been complicit in tyranny witnessed not mindless revenge but calculated justice, and the contrast made her reputation even more formidable. Humanity, she demonstrated, is not only capable of survival and intelligence but also of mercy and discernment. Her enemies learned that underestimating human resolve was fatal, and that underestimating human morality could be just as devastating. Her campaigns moved like a storm. Cities that had once been thought secure fell before her. Armies that had relied on numbers alone found themselves dismantled by her tactics. She exploited terrain, manipulated weather, used distractions and ambushes, turning every environmental factor into an ally. Her strategies were not mere repetition, they were innovation at every turn, each plan more sophisticated and precise than the last. The enemy could not predict her moves, could not adapt fast enough, and could not withstand the combination of intellect, creativity, and unyielding human courage that defined her approach. She demonstrated that survival alone is not enough. Victory belongs to those who innovate, anticipate, and act without hesitation. Even the leaders who had orchestrated her exile began to falter. They had assumed she was broken, scattered, defeated. Now they faced a force that combined experience, intellect, and relentless determination. A force that acted with the precision of a mind that had endured betrayal, hunger, and exile. Every engagement reminded them of a simple but deadly truth. The human mind, when pushed to its limits, becomes unpredictable, unstoppable, and terrifyingly effective. The Queen was not merely reclaiming land. She was dismantling the arrogance and overconfidence that had allowed her betrayal to succeed in the first place. Her leadership inspired not just her immediate followers but entire populations. People who had lived under oppression, fear, or doubt began to rise in support. Small victories ignited hope, hope fueled action, and action became an unstoppable momentum. Human resilience and ingenuity were contagious, spreading faster than any army could march. Every freed village, every liberated town, every act of clever strategy reinforced the unstoppable force that she had become. Her presence alone galvanized communities, turning citizens into fighters, supporters into strategists, and the oppressed into collaborators in her unstoppable campaign. And still, she remained focused. She did not allow triumphs to blind her or mistakes to shake her resolve. Every battle was analyzed, every consequence considered, every next step planned. She understood that victory was a continuum, not a single event, and she wielded her growing power with discipline and purpose. The Queen was no longer merely reclaiming her throne, she was demonstrating the full extent of human capability. Intellect, strategy, courage, and an unyielding will to overcome any obstacle. Each enemy she defeated, each territory she reclaimed, each loyalist she reunited was a testament to the unbreakable strength of human determination. By the time she approached the stronghold of her ultimate enemy, the Queen was not just a ruler returned, she was a force of nature. Every minor battle, every calculated strike, every display of ingenuity had been preparation for this moment. The enemy who had stolen her kingdom and scattered her people now faced a mind and spirit that had been sharpened by betrayal, honed by hardship, and fueled by a desire that could not be extinguished. She had turned exile into strategy, loss into power, and vengeance into a precise instrument of justice. The time for hesitation was gone. The Queen was ready to reclaim her world, and nothing, no matter how formidable, could stand in her way. The final confrontation was not a battle. It was the inevitable culmination of every choice, every sacrifice, and every lesson learned in exile. She had prepared for this moment with meticulous precision, each step designed to ensure not just victory, but the complete reclamation of her world. Her enemies believed they had crushed her, scattered her people, and shattered her spirit, but they had only forged her into a force they could not comprehend. Every plan, every strategy, every calculated move now came together, unstoppable and precise. The Queen would not merely retake her throne, she would redefine the very meaning of power. She moved with the confidence of one who knows the truth of her own strength. Her allies, loyal and battle-hardened, mirrored her determination. They were more than soldiers. They were a living testament to human resilience, intelligence, and courage. Every step forward was a statement. Betrayal had not defeated her, exile had not diminished her, and fire had only sharpened her resolve. The forces arrayed against her underestimated the power of a mind and spirit that had survived the unthinkable and emerged stronger. They believed in numbers and fear. She believed in strategy, ingenuity, and the unyielding will to reclaim what was hers. As her campaign reached its climax, she struck with precision and creativity that defied expectation. Supply lines collapsed before they could reach the front, alliances fractured under psychological pressure, and enemy morale crumbled. Every maneuver was calculated to maximize impact while minimizing unnecessary risk. Human adaptability and ingenuity shone through in every action. Her enemies found themselves outmatched not only in strength but in intellect and foresight. Where they relied on brute force and rigid hierarchy, she exploited every weakness, every flaw, and every assumption they had made about her capabilities. She demonstrated that the true power of humanity lies in the combination of courage, strategy, and relentless determination. The people she had reclaimed along the way rallied to her cause with unwavering loyalty. Communities that had suffered under oppression now flourished under her guidance. Her leadership inspired ingenuity and cooperation, turning ordinary citizens into strategic assets, every mind contributing to the campaign's success. She had built not just an army, but a movement, a living network of human potential that could respond, adapt, and innovate in ways that no tyrant could predict or control. Her victories were amplified by the strength and creativity of those who believed in her, proving that human unity and intelligence are as formidable as any weapon. When she confronted the leaders responsible for her exile, she did so with the precision and clarity of a mind honed by hardship. They expected rage, chaos, and desperation. Instead, they found strategy, resolve, and absolute certainty. Every decision she made was deliberate, every strike calculated, every outcome anticipated. The queen had become more than a ruler returning. She had become a force of inevitability, an unstoppable assertion of human capability. Her enemies were unprepared for the combination of intellect, courage, and moral clarity that defined her approach. They realized too late that the human mind, once honed by adversity, can achieve feats that brute force alone cannot overcome. The reclamation of her throne was not a simple restoration, it was a transformation. She did not merely return to power, she reshaped the world around her, ensuring that the systems of oppression and betrayal could never rise again. Every law, every structure, every alliance was rebuilt with insight and foresight, reflecting the lessons of exile and the strength of human resilience. Her people were not simply subjects, they were collaborators in a society that thrived on ingenuity, cooperation, and the relentless pursuit of justice. The Queen's victory was a testament to the potential of humanity to endure, adapt, and triumph against impossible odds. Her enemies who survived were forced to reckon with the full magnitude of human ingenuity and determination. Those who had plotted her downfall witnessed firsthand the consequences of underestimating intellect and will. Every decision they had made, every assumption of superiority, had been exploited and dismantled. Humanity, they realized, is not defined by numbers or intimidation alone, but by creativity, strategy, courage, and the refusal to yield. The Queen's triumph was not just a personal victory, it was an assertion of human potential, a demonstration that no matter the odds, ingenuity and resolve can reclaim what is lost. The Queen also restored her people with care and purpose. Those who had been oppressed, displaced, or betrayed were welcomed, trained, and empowered. Communities rebuilt themselves under her guidance, learning from the innovations, strategies, and lessons she had acquired in exile. Human resilience, she demonstrated, is not just about survival, but about growth, adaptation, and the capacity to transform adversity into opportunity. Every success, every triumph, every liberated citizen reinforced the reality that human spirit and intelligence are unstoppable forces when aligned with determination and purpose. At the moment she finally reclaimed her throne, it was more than a symbolic victory. It was proof that no matter how far one is pushed, no matter the betrayal endured, the human mind and spirit can recover, adapt, and conquer. Her enemies were vanquished not just by force, but by intellect, strategy, and unyielding perseverance. Her people were freed, not just from oppression, but from fear and doubt, empowered to participate in a society built on ingenuity, courage, and trust. Humanity, at its peak, had proven itself unstoppable, capable of reclaiming what was lost and reshaping the future in its own image. In the quiet moments that followed, she reflected on what had been accomplished. The fire of her exile had not destroyed her. It had illuminated her path, sharpened her mind, and strengthened her heart. Every step, every battle, every act of ingenuity and courage had led to this moment, a world reclaimed, people restored, enemies humbled, and a legacy forged in resilience and intelligence. The dawn of her reclaimed world was more than a new beginning. It was a declaration that human ingenuity, courage, and perseverance are forces no betrayal can destroy. She had faced exile, outwitted enemies, rallied her people, and struck with precision and intelligence. The world had tried to erase her, but humanity refused to be forgotten. Every citizen, every ally, every mind she inspired became a living part of the testament. The human spirit, once tested, becomes unstoppable. She had reclaimed her throne, not as a ruler of lands, but as a symbol of human potential, resilience, and the relentless drive to rise, adapt, and triumph against all odds. Her story, now complete, would echo through generations. It was not just a tale of vengeance, nor merely of power regained. It was a celebration of the human capacity to endure, innovate, and prevail. Betrayal had sparked a fire, exile had tempered it, and her mind had guided it to triumph. The Queen's victory proved that human ingenuity, courage, and determination are forces beyond reckoning. Her throne was restored, her people empowered, and her world reborn, all through the demonstration of what it means to be human, resilient, clever, and unstoppable. Humanity had triumphed, and the universe would never forget.